Science fiction, there's not much to watch for me right now. I like science fiction. I don't like science fantasy, although I will watch it. I've talked about this before that some of it's just unbearable, okay? From Logan's Run on up through the future. Star Trek. So you have a transporter, and you have a transporter buffer. And the transporter buffer is where your atomic structure is stored. And then a copy of you is perfectly recreated wherever you want to go. And it's called a transporter. This is basically the technology I talk about, that beings that visit our planet that are a billion years more advanced than us, they will have learned how to control everything from muons up. And they'll be able to make anything they need, anything they want. They don't need or want anything, including your body. You could, if you chose to do so, you could live forever. You would simply always have a copy of yourself in a pattern buffer, just like a hard drive, except beyond our limit of understanding. And you would just reconstitute yourself. You could also have two of you, which I believe maybe it'll be like the dual slit experiment. You can't monitor that. Maybe you can't have two of you. I don't know. That's speculation, but that's science fiction, okay, in its purest form. If you have that technology, you can have two of you. The only time they use a faster than light object as a weapon in Star Wars was, when they blew up the Dreadnought or Snoke's ship, simply by accelerating to the speed of light and using yourself as a battering ram. So why would you go through all of the fucking trouble of building a Death Star? Why would you go through all of the trouble of building a death planet? Okay? If you can go faster than the speed of light. You simply get a big ship, you go the speed of light, and you kick out a giant solid, future metal denser than uranium object. Just a mile across, maybe a mile across, maybe less, maybe a quarter mile by, let's say, 1,000 yards by 1,000 yards, and you just kick it out, and a big slug strikes the planet at the speed of light. No more planet. No cost in energy, no cost in manpower, no vulnerabilities. See? Why build a giant fucking Death Star? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you have some kind of a shield or whatever, okay? As long as you're going to start saying, oh, we can go faster than the speed of light. Now you have to tell me how much faster than the speed of light. Because if you're going from this star system to that star system in 5 seconds, 5 minutes, then you're going many, 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 many thousands of times the speed of light. So now we're talking about an even deadlier weapon and an even smaller object. So something the size of a baseball that's denser than uranium. Now you're going 100 times the speed of light. See? Once you start opening up that process of thinking, you're fucked. Because someone like me immediately goes, why'd you do that? You spend all that time, effort, money, and now you're fucking vulnerable. You know what I mean? Nobody talked about the Death Star going warp speed. How the fuck did it get from planet to planet? Could it go faster than light too? Did it go, warp speed? Well, they never talk about that, do they? Well, that's the first thing I'm thinking about. It took them all that time. Oh, we're almost around. Oh, we're waiting. Oh, we're almost there. Well, it's like, what? You can't move your fucking Death Star? See? Science fiction is very difficult to write. It has to be based on something that can actually exist, and that can be incredibly fantastical. Think about, I love I love talking about the difference between an amoeba and a human. because that's 1 billion years of evolution. And so I think about, you know, beings that are billions of years more advanced than us, and the technology they have and how long they can live. They have a replicator. They simply say, "Oh, I'd like a chicken sandwich and a cup of coffee," and there's a chicken sandwich and a cup of coffee, and you don't even need to recycle your sewage or whatever, but you could. You could break it down, you know what I mean, into its constituent particles, your quantum particles, all the way down to muons, gluons that hold everything together, fields, and then you can reconstruct it from there up because you have the technology. That's if you try to describe your phone to an amoeba, then how could you possibly, as the amoeba, think about the technology that goes into this iPhone? That's how they would look at us. Now, there's good bacteria and bad bacteria. Our bodies are, we're literally living in this shit, okay? Um, and it's a constructive relationship, and it's positive for the universe. And then you have some that are negative that cause death and destruction, right? But even rot is part of the process, and so is death. It's the concept of good and evil that this is where religion came from, because men tried to rationalize that concept very early on. I know good people and bad people, but I will be honest with you, truthfully, okay? I know more good people than bad. And most people that I've met in my life, all over this world, all over this country, have just been fucking awesome. Friendly, welcoming, help you in any way they could. And then there's some places you go, some cities you go to where no one trusts anyone, okay? But if you get out into the parts of America that aren't major cities like New York or Chicago, not that New York or Chicago is bad, okay, but it's a different environment. People are more welcoming and open, and just most people I met in my life weren't bad people. They were good people. I didn't have to agree with their politics or their religion or anything. They were just good people. We never, I can remember 30 years ago, we never argued about politics. We had a discussion about politics, but it was nothing like today. And the two groups were much closer together. Okay, much closer together. They've gone way left and way right. You know what I mean? And they forgot us, stuck in the middle. I think good science fiction includes all of those thoughts, good and evil. That's what makes a good story anyway. Okay, that's what you got your classic, peril, almost being defeated and then succeeding in the end, you know what I mean? And I mean, there's these formulaic type movies. I watch them, they're entertaining. Some are better than others, absolutely. But when it comes to science fiction, okay, that should teach you something. If you have a science fiction movie that puts forth concepts that are absolutely possible but above our technological level, right? Very interesting. It stretches your mind, your imagination. We don't get much of that anymore. Everything seems to be a copy of a copy. Now they're going back to the classics and remaking them, and that's because most of your good science fiction writers are doing books, not screenplays. Screenplays are different. If you read something like Ringworld, I always talk about Niven's Ringworld series because the way it's presented is very factual, and you understand, everything. You're given lessons on everything from inertia, right, to how atmospheres can be maintained in space, how gravity works to help you, how centrifugal force, all of those things, right, are just basic concepts to have the ring world function. And then he goes from there and gets deeper and deeper and deeper into the propulsion systems that keep it rotating. And I mean, It's an incredibly interesting series, and it's such a vast area that you basically have content for stories as you move around the ring. Different cultures, different societies, different technologies, because it's so vast. Very interesting series. Okay, good science fiction. Okay, Ben Bova, Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury. Those are all my favorites. I like Edgar Allan Poe too, but Mark Twain too. I mean, there are some that are my favorites that aren't science fiction. Okay. I like reading poetry. Uh, I like I don't need the romance novels. You know what I mean? But I like stories that are based on this is what happened in my life. I like biographical formats in books. I like that. Some people have extremely interesting lives. And see, the fact is that you know that it can possibly happen because it happened to this guy. And that's how science fiction is. That's how it reaches you and locks you in. But you need a certain level of education to appreciate good science fiction, where they make the effort to say, oh, well, this person just died. Well, why don't you go into the pattern buffer and recreate him? Or, which I've never heard discussed on Star Trek, which there's Trekkies out there that can answer this. If someone dies, is there a law that says you cannot keep yourself or a copy of yourself in the pattern buffer? That's good and evil concept, isn't it? See, good and evil, it's necessary. Good science fiction needs it to put the emotional content into science fiction. You don't want it to just be a slide rule fucking story. You know what I mean? It takes you down this regimented, you need surprise, and you know what I mean? There has to be emotional content. There's no more emotional content than what was the discussion and how was a law passed and how did you reach it and how did people agree on it when it came to not leaving people in the pattern buffer so that you couldn't reproduce yourself and go on forever. People die there. And then they have episodes where they'll put you in the pattern buffer and then they'll filter out diseases and things like that, right? But then you have another episode where that's not used and you're like, well, why don't you just put him in the pattern buffer and see? Bad science fiction. Written by people who don't understand that there are science fiction fans and science fiction fantasy fans. There's even what I call science fantasy, okay? Logan's Run. Science fantasy. It's fantasy because nothing that you see in Logan's Run, the original, could function the way it does. Did they talk about food? Well, where did they grow their food? We didn't see any farmers or fields. They never talked about food in any way. You never saw any place that was serving food. They only drank and did drugs. See? Well, or when Logan and Jessica, they go up the elevator and they meet Box. And he gives them the spiel about, fish, you know what I mean? Protein from the sea. And you can tell that everything's this ice everywhere. And he shows them the other runners who've been frozen. But it's not shown that way. Logan insists that Box show him, and then he shows him. And so you're like, what was there? Did Logan interrupt a process that this guy's used to doing? What, he'd take you to dinner and drug you? Give you, you know what I mean? And then he shoots the ceiling and Box yells, "My birds." And the entire place starts crashing down. Giant hunks of ice. I don't know what these racks are made out of, fucking marshmallows? But they're falling everywhere, and literally the whole roof is caving in, giant chunks of ice, and he's just standing there without even a hair moving. No, not getting wet, no snow, no. And if you look, it gets piled up to here before they do the cut scene. Giant chunks of ice the size of my damn chair here, falling down. Nothing. And it's not just falling down, it is literally falling on them. See, that's science fantasy. The concept itself might be, but the way it's presented is definitely not science fiction. It's science fantasy. And then you have a level. You have from what people would consider boring, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey. People fell asleep in the movies who were expecting to see something, different, I think. And it was science fact all the way right up to the end, because what happened to him, you know, Dave went through some shit, and the little and experiencing himself throughout time, getting older, and then finally being reborn as the baby. And there's a million ways people have talked about what that means. But see, if you're a billion years more advanced than someone, uh, the concepts, you wouldn't get them. You couldn't begin to understand them. This is what affected me really bad for 5 years after my near-death experience. I was, I think I had PTSD. Plus, I had a very abusive stepdad. But I couldn't remember. I remember the question: why do we have to do this? And I did. When I said, "Why do we have to do this?" Trust me, it was way more complicated than that. The question I asked was about the whole entire universe and all the races that are in it, all the sentience and consciousness. And I mean, the question that I asked was incredibly simple, but the way I asked it, they understood what I meant. And the answer they gave me was so correct, right. Total, complete righteousness in the why, that all I could think of was, of course, of course, of course. See, like that. And I don't mean lightly. I mean, of course, that's why. I mean, almost tears flowing. That's what I felt for years. And I craved a solution to that, because I didn't, what happened to me. I mean, I made my mom take me to every church there was, every religion there was. And as soon as I would walk in, it was dark and evil. It was nothing like what I had experienced. Nothing. Men's religion is a bane on mankind. And finally, she told me what I was looking for didn't exist here. But she tried for years to help me. And then I had a dream one night that kind of worked around that concept. And everything about my near-death experience was kind of in that dream. And it almost was like turning a key. And I stopped suppressing the memories, and I accepted it. I accepted it. Okay. That first off, that I wasn't going to find what I wanted to hear, that what I experienced was real, and that I wasn't, that I got tricked to come back. And I always looked at that as punishment, that God, these ultimate beings that I was with, not God, these ultimate beings of love and understanding, that they had tricked me. That's how I felt. I felt like that they didn't really love me, that they punished me. But see, now I'm a human thinking like a human again. But it affected me terribly until that very vivid dream, and I kind of experienced it all over again, except with some missing parts. That was, we do love you. we do love you. And after that, I was better. And then I kind of, all throughout life, I tried to deny it happened, because it affected my life every fucking day. I tried to deny it. That's why I got into science fiction, okay? Because I was looking for something in science fiction that said, this is what possibly could have happened to you. There's an alien race somewhere, and they take you and they do this as an experiment or something. You know what I mean? I looked for any explanation, and I found a lot of it what might possibly be in pure science fiction. So at the age of 12, I was going through 2 books a week. Good science fiction had a lot to do with me coming back to functioning better in society and accepting things. It's not feeling like I'd been tricked. Uh, Good science fiction, that's why I have a thing for it, because it did help me at a critical point in my life to a large degree. And I think it can help everybody. You see, it is a good and evil story. It's not just the four forces. It's not about it's good and evil. It's love and not love. That's where I went. It was all love. And here it's not that way. The physical universe, okay, you need to evolve for a long time before you get rid of the animal brain in you. Look at what we do here on the planet. Look what we're doing so that some motherfucker can have a big boat. Okay? We all know it's wrong, but we can't stop it because those people are the ones who put the system in power. Okay? I'm willing to accept that. Religion. I went in and out of the anus of religion many times because the more I learned, the more I went, well, maybe I'm being closed-minded. And I would look at it again and then go, nope, still the same hypocritical dickwads that was there before. After the same thing, control, absolutely flawed fucking human beings to the core. The hypocrisy was just dripping. And then I discovered quantum mechanics. Changed everything. Again, science. The fact that it's bizarre and fucking strange as our reality is, it is real. And you can count on it, okay? Because the math tells you it's true. 1 and 1 is always going to be 2, okay? The math tells us things that are concepts that are hard for us to understand, but nonetheless, they're true, okay? And you know, Musashi, right? The truth is the truth, and you have to bend to its will or live a lie. And that's what science does for me. And that's how when I had my last experience, that I conceded and said, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. I will do it. I'm sorry that I waited so long. And I started telling people about my experience and that suicide was something you couldn't do because they showed me my death by suicide. And then they showed me something different. And the different was, I'm sure that, like my wife and people in my life that helped me reach that point, especially my wife. And then there was the other one where it was all selfish and not caring about other people right to the fucking end. You know what I mean? Taking care of number one. They're not my problem kind of thing, right? And you're just not allowed, period. I have videos that cover that. But good science fiction, we don't get much, All of the concepts in science fiction that I see on TV today, I'm just like, oh my God, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Just nonstop all throughout. Drives the old lady crazy. Yeah. Science helped me through a rough spot in my life. That's why I have it's charming to me, When you think of living on a flat universe, when you try to think of infinity, when you try to think of, okay, so the dose slit experiment says you can't monitor this. You see, that's not talked about a lot because they can't explain it. And therefore, scientists, they don't want to dip their toe in that. That's all I'm interested in. I could give a fuck about the results. The results speak for themselves. It's happening. Okay, I fucking agree. It's happening. It's happening. You see, but it's not happening when you try to monitor it. You see, that's what I'm interested in. That's the science I want to know about. They go all the way back to fucking gluons, okay? You know, making fundamental particles. Well, yeah, okay, so you got your gluons forming, you know, protons or neutrons. What comes before gluons? They're fields. They're just fields. That's the science I'm interested in. See? Because someone a billion years more advanced than me would look at that and be able to give me a real answer. A real answer. A simple, clean, real answer. I want to know why you can't monitor the dual slit experiment. Scientists are not fucking interested in that. They look at the results, they look at, you know, the experiment itself, and then they ask questions that don't have to do with the why, which is what I'm interested in. Okay, I had to get that off my shoulders. I watched 2 science fiction programs today and I just went, geez, I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. Most of my streaming services, I've watched what I want to watch already. Some of my subscribers are telling me to get commercial free YouTube, and I'm starting to think they're right. Yeah, right. You're right. You know, you're right. Because I find more enjoyment in just watching someone build something than I do pretty much any program on television. Watch a guy, a furniture maker make something beautiful. You know what I mean? I'd like to have a program on right now that shows me different pictures of things under an electron scanning microscope. I can do that on YouTube, can't do it on TV. See? Okay, I've yacked enough for the day. I just had to get that off my shoulder. Science has meaning to me, and now you know why. This is why I talk about science, fantasy, and science, true science fiction, and why science, you know, why I talk about science saving me and how quantum mechanics saved me. Okay, it was because it gave me a handle, even as mysterious and quantum as it is. It gave me a handle to say, okay, relax. You don't have to understand it. You just have to know that it's possible. Done.